Former Zambian President Edgar Lungu has been stripped of his retirement benefits and privileges. The government withdrew these perks after he returned to active politics ahead of his expected 2026 presidential bid. This is in line with the country's law, which states that those who participate in politics after leaving the highest office forfeit their benefits. Lungu has been in retirement since 2021 when he lost the presidency to Hakainde Hichilema. And to tell us more about this, I'm joined by Zambian MP from the Patriotic Front George Chisanga. Mr. Chisanga, appreciate your time this evening. Now, what is the party's stance on the government's decision to withdraw Edgar Lungu's retirement benefits and privileges when he returned to active politics?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the program. Really, the party is not even bothered by that decision. That decision was actually made by the former president himself when he decided to move from being in retirement to return to active politics. It's a decision that he made realizing that it was going to, among other things, result in the withdrawal of the benefits that he had as a retired president. So we're not bothered at all as a party.
Now, just how does the party plan to support Edgar Lungu's return to politics?
Well, I think we have well wishers, but what is very important to realize that the decision was made as a sacrifice, really. I think the former president was well aware that his decision to return into active politics is going to result in him having these benefits and pension withdrawn from him. But he realized that he needed to make a sacrifice together with other members of the political party because the intention was to ensure that he participates in a project that is designed to protect the multi-party state system. It was born out of because of the experiences the country's been going through in the last 2 weeks, when the party in power decided it was going to crush the Patriotic Front and remove it from the political platform. So having seen what the country was going through and having consulted according to what he declared when he was making a statement, and having in his assessment sought the face of the Lord, he decided the best thing to do is to return to active politics, even if it means I'm going to lose the benefits. But of course, we've got well-wishers as a political party. I mean, we've survived the last 2 years, but basically depending on the membership and depending also on our partners who are working with us. We've got various smart partnerships with some stakeholders that continue to assist the party financially and otherwise.
Well, former President Edgar Lungu has already been persecuted. I think the Patriotic Front has called it that. A few months ago, we reported on a story where he was stopped or ordered to stop walking or running in the morning because he was gathering crowds, and this was politicking of sorts. How do you see the terrain over the next 2 years ahead of him running for the next election?
We actually think that his life is not going to be as easy, but we are prepared to work with him and face the consequences of the decision that is made. But the reality is that there's a deliberate misunderstanding of what informed this decision for him to come back to active politics. You are right when you say that he has actually been a subject for persecution, and I can tell you that the persecution started right at the time that Dr. Lungu was voted out of power. In fact, the persecution was not only limited to him, it's extended to all the senior leadership of Patriotic Front. We've been in and out of court representing the most senior members of Patriotic Front who have been accused of all manner of corrupt practices, but we haven't had a single conviction yet, apart from one minister who clearly was convicted on an issue where, because of subordinates, did not account properly for money that was intended for the poor and underprivileged. She was actually convicted because of in-assessment negligence. But with Dr. Lungu, the persecution started right at the time that he left power. If you've noticed in the last 2 years, he has lived similarly to an imprisoned person because he has not enjoyed his privileges. And even the benefits of being retired president, I think, had not been given to him in full. There is so much that was missing in terms of package that was entitled to. But he lived with that because I think he realized that there was something of a blood rending between himself and the current president. And this is something that people don't hide from. They will tell you the truth about it. So even when he was just going to church, going to attend family functions, and several other social activities that he would have wanted to get involved in just as a retired president, that was still raising storms within the nation. And you're right to point it out, what became very visible is when he started being invited to try and basically help people to live a health lifestyle. He was being invited by various groups that wanted to engage him and have a morning jog with him. And that was interpreted to be politicking by the party that is in power. And they actually blocked it. It was a very draconian way of dealing with it. Apart from saying you shouldn't be jogging, or at least you should restrict jogging to some place where they indicated, they went to a road which is yet to be commissioned. If you remember the Patriotic Front when it was in power, it was doing a lot of infrastructure development, and this road had been constructed by the Patriotic Front but not yet commissioned, but it's in the neighborhood of where the former president is living. And that's the road he was using. They went and threw all manner of obstacles on the road to prevent from using the following day for jogging. And this, I think, is what Zambians now started feeling sympathetic towards him. So he's not being allowed to live a life, that a retired president is supposed to be living. And that time when the questions were asked of him, he had indicated he was still in retirement, and people, when they asked him to come to active politics at that time, he said, look, I need to think about this because I'm enjoying my retirement and I want to do something using an NGO that he set up for himself.
Now, Mr. Chisanga, let's go back a few years. And we talk about the period where current President Hakainde Hichilema was the main opposition. Now, he went through similar persecution from the Patriotic Front government. Is this a case of tit for tat? Is this how the politics pans out in Zambia?
Well, at the risk of sounding subjective, I wouldn't want to compare, I think, the kind of persecution in inverted commas that the previous the president currently, when he was in opposition, went through. Of course, there were some instances, where he was not allowed to gather, he was not allowed to address meetings. But the misfortune with this experience in Zambia is that it does appear that when a political party is in power, the police seem to feel that they've got a duty to protect the party which is in power and a duty to sort of keep punishing the party which is not in power. Those are the kinds of experiences that he was going through. But I can tell you, because I've been in civil society for a long time myself. I'm a former president of the Law Association of Zambia and currently, of course, a member of parliament for the Patriotic Front. The kind of restraints that Mr. Hichilema, was subjected to cannot be compared to the kinds of restraints that Dr. Lungu is being subjected to. The field seemed to be based on the experience that Mr. Hichilema had at the hands of Dr. Lungu, because at one time he was incarcerated. I think we say he spent about 121 days in custody on a treason charge. But we have tried to explain that, and I think people now understand what actually transpired. Of course, we don't want to justify that as a basis for saying Mr. Lungu must be given some freedom. We were unhappy at the time that Mr. Hichilema was in opposition and was arrested. I personally was able to engage Dr. Lungu, then president, because I was civil society leader. And myself and several other people that engaged him, had managed to persuade him to drop the charges of treason that had been preferred against Mr. Hichilema. My thinking is that Mr. Hichilema should not have, this should not be the motivation, if one can use that term, that you would be using to persecute Dr. Lungu. The concern that we're sitting with right now, even as a sitting member of parliament, is that the last time Mr. Hichilema attended parliament, he was trying to chronicle what they've done so far with the Patriotic Front leadership in terms of investigating cases of money or financial crimes. And, sometimes words come out of your mouth unintended, but they do portray exactly what you intend to do. He made a statement on the floor of the House and addressing the nation that if the government of the UPND is going to prosecute people or persecute them as a way to recover money that they had been stolen, they would actually just do that now. Such a statement coming up against the backdrop of so much aggression that has been used against not only Dr. Lungu but several other senior leaders of the Patriotic Front was not received well by the population. But bringing it down again to Dr. Lungu, I do not think that a president who wins, an election the way Dr. Hichilema won this election would want to use revenge as a means of trying to entrench himself in office. I think a president who even understands his constitutional mandate would allow the country to be run on what is called the rule of law. Would allow an environment where constitutionalism and respect for freedom and rights is actually engaged to ensure that we have a profile of the governance in the country being elevated. But unfortunately, what we see, in terms of the treatment that Lungu has received at the hands of this government is something that has raised so much concern to the Zambian people. But in my personal assessment, it is not in any way connected with the decision that is made to return to active politics. It's just to return to active politics to try and help the party to be salvaged. Because the challenges that the party is going through right now are so huge that if we don't put our heads together and if we don't put our efforts together, we might find ourselves out of a political platform by the end of this year. And this is what we've resolved we're not going to allow to happen, because the country is a multi-party state system.
Mr. Chisanga, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us on Africa Today.